And just before the plane took off, these soldiers came on the plane, and they called out a bunch of names, men's names, and they took the men off the plane. And one of the names called was that of my father. And the last thing that I remember seeing was that these people were being executed on the runway.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide, and we see God. We see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome to episode 99 of Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. When you pray, you ask for stuff, right? Sure. Our guest today does not, never has never asked for a thing, and yet has received more than she could have ever hoped for. How does that work? How does she pray? At the age of 20, she should have died in a car accident, but there was this extra set of hands on the steering wheel. How does that work? At the beginning of this episode, an execution of men. Her father should have died right then and there, and yet he lived. How did that happen? This episode is entitled The Education You Can't Buy. And our teacher in this episode is a woman named Olga. Olga? Yeah, picture in your mind Olga, okay? Because, with a name like Olga, that name makes a statement, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. People think that I'm this big Germanic woman with braids when they hear the name. But I'm actually a very petite, brunette, Hispanic.
Hispanic Olga. You see, Olga's backstory is almost as interesting as her Touched by Heaven moment, so I want you to hear this as well. Born in Havana, Cuba, in the 50s. She's not the only Olga in Havana, Cuba, because there was a huge actress at the time named Olga. So lots of little Olgas were running around. This is all pre-Fidel Castro. And then when Fidel Castro took over as dictator, this is when Mom and Dad decided to take Olga and Olga's two younger sisters out of Cuba.
When I was just about kindergarten age, Castro took over the island, and my parents fled. Most of the island fled.
And you could do that for a while, legally do that, at a price.
Oh, yes. You had to leave your home and your money and your possessions and everything behind to sort of bribe the government to let you out alive.
Dad flew to New York City in hopes of getting an apartment, a job, getting established. And a week later, the plan being for Mom and the three kids to join Dad.
So it was my mother and two younger sisters and I who boarded that plane. And just before the plane took off, these soldiers came on the plane, and they called out a bunch of names, men's names, and they took the men off the plane. And one of the names called was that of my father. He was called, but he had left a week early. And then they told the pilot to take off. And the women on the plane were hysterical. Their brothers and fathers and sons had been taken off the plane. And the last thing that I remember seeing was that these people were being executed on the runway.
And you saw them executing these guys on the runway? Correct.
And so there was a lot of weeping and screaming and blah, blah, carrying on. You can't even imagine. And the plane just took off, and that was that.
There had to be hysteria all the way to New York then.
Yeah, totally. It was just horror. It was horrible. My mother was very quiet. She wasn't weeping or crying or carrying on. And we were just sitting together. And I remember she told us my grandmother had passed away not too long before that in Cuba. And she said, look out on the clouds. Just look out on the clouds. You might see Beva. You might see your grandmother. Look for her. And so that took our minds off of what we had just seen. I remember looking out over the clouds, trying to find my grandmother. And so we left with just some documents, birth certificates, family photographs. And we got out about 2 weeks before they closed the gates and wouldn't let anybody out anymore.
But you had nothing. I mean, you literally had nothing.
We had literally nothing. But my parents were hardworking, and they found work. I think they were on welfare for a month before they both were able to find work.
Ultimately, Dad went into the banking business. Mom was a fast typist. She transcribed documents, so they had employment.
They saved their money, and we bought a house, and we had a good upbringing. We settled on Staten Island. So, life was very good in this country. Yeah, we were fortunate to come to this country.
Absolutely. What a cool story. What a cool story.
Yeah.
And so you come along, and what did you end up doing in your career?
I have a master's in biochemistry. I have several degrees, and I became a criminal defense attorney.
Looky you. Looky
you.
And boy, if you know you're a criminal defense attorney is someone named Olga, you don't know who's coming in the court, do you?
You don't know. And and I just retired this past June.
Ah, congratulations.
So, thank you. And so, recently I started listening to your podcast. There were a couple of episodes, I guess, of women who had experienced what I emailed you about. And up until that point, I had never told anyone in my entire life what had happened to me. But these women's experiences were very, very close to what I experienced. And so I was inspired to email you.
That's the cool thing about this. I think people find it a safe haven, if you will, and in finding out that, I'm not the only one. There's
exactly.
Lots and lots of people going, and even if not sharing the exact same experience, just the knowledge that, as I say, God shooting off the flare gun, saying, I'm right here. I'm always right here, through all these stories. So with that in mind, what's story number one?
I'll save my favorite story for second. And I was about 20, and I had some birthday money, and I was very anxious to get to the mall to buy a new blouse or a new pair of pants, whatever. So I was very anxious, and I was driving carelessly, recklessly. It was a 3-lane street heading to the mall, and I was swerving left and right just to get to the mall fast enough. And I was not looking in my mirrors. And at one point, I wanted to get into the left lane, and I yanked the steering wheel. So I yanked the steering wheel hard to the left, wanting to get into the left lane. And simultaneously, in the same moment, the wheel yanked equally hard to the right, and it wasn't me, such that my car stayed in the middle lane. And again, practically in the same moment, this double long tractor trailer, and before that, I didn't even know that double long tractor trailers existed. That was the first one I had ever seen. It went by me on the left-hand side. It was going 60, 70 miles an hour, and it was such a powerful vehicle that it shook my car. I was in a big car, but that made my car vibrate, the passing of that giant truck going by me on the left. Had I gone into the left lane, and when I yanked that steering wheel to the left, I did it with all of my will, my desire, my intention. It was my will to get into the left lane, but it was something else's will that I not. I wouldn't just been dead. I would have been vaporized. I would have been a red mist spread by the wind over a long distance, because that truck would have just vaporized me in my car. And afterwards, I thought, not in the moment, because I couldn't even think. I was like, But afterwards, I thought, I was very well aware that my life had been spared in that moment. But that truck driver, he was not aware that his life had probably been spared in that moment. And the people driving around me probably were just driving unaware that their lives had been spared in that moment, because that truck was so big and long that it could have flipped over or rolled over or whipped around and taken out many vehicles. The crash would have been catastrophic. A lot of people's lives were spared in that moment. It wasn't just about me.
They have no idea.
And they had no idea. And I thought, we go through life and we have no idea how often we are spared, how often we're saved, or, that our lives are saved. We have no idea the things that are going on behind the scenes.
The angels and their highway patrol work it must be nonstop when you think about all the things that coulda, shoulda, woulda,
Exactly. My guardian angel deserves a promotion. When I die and go to heaven, hopefully, I'm going to ask God to give my guardian angel a big promotion.
I don't know if you ever heard the Zoltan Jaska. He's the trucker who had the exact same experience you had, only he was the one driving the 18-wheeler.
Oh, okay.
But here he was tooling through St. Louis in the middle lane of this 5-lane highway. Same thing as you. His exit's coming up. He's got to move over to the right, and he can't move his steering wheel. It's locked. He can't move right. He can't move left. He can't move at all. And he's freaking because at some point this road's going to turn. And he is he's total panic mode. He can't move. He cannot move the steering wheel until the car that was in the right-hand lane in his blind spot passed him by, and then the steering wheel could move.
There you go.
There you go. And it's like that driver has no idea their life was spared, and whatever other traffic along the road has no idea. We don't know. We have no idea. You know, we all have a purpose, and he's still on target, and his time hasn't come yet. And obviously your time hadn't come yet either. But in your case, at age 20, what do you think you were doing right, if you will? Or was it your parents' prayers? What do you think kept you alive?
You know, I don't know that it was even for me. It might have been for the truck driver who had a wife and 3 kids at home. It might have been for the mother next to me who had 3 little girls in the car with her. You know, I don't know if it was all about me, but I was raised Roman Catholic, and I always believed I had a guardian angel. I even named my guardian angel. And I believed in God and Jesus and Mary, and you know, it was nothing foreign to me.
Right.
When this happened.
What was the name? What did you name your angel?
Beloved.
Beloved. Still to this day?
To this day.
That's nice. That is nice. Did your faith change at all on the way, or have you stayed with your faith?
It's gotten stronger because of experiences that I've had. It's not about faith anymore. It's about knowing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so.
It's about not being able to deny things that have happened. You know, I can't rationalize them away.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you just said there, because after a while, it's not faith anymore. My faith is dwindling. My knowing is growing. My belonging is growing. So, boy, I mean, that one can't leave you though. That just can't ever leave you. That what if? That's a total what if.
Yeah. I came as close to dying in that moment as I could possibly. I was a moment away from just dying. I wouldn't even have felt it. You know, I don't think.
Was your parents' faith strong?
I never heard them pray, but we went to church on Sundays. And, you know, again, they worked very hard to put together some money. And they could have put us in public school, but they always sacrificed and kept us in Catholic schools. Mm-hmm. So their faith must have been important to them. Yeah. You know, at least from what I could tell in that sense.
And that has something to do with the next story.
Yes. This is my favorite story.
And this story will demonstrate how Olga prays, how she's always prayed, how she never asks for anything. Back in the 8th grade, the kids got bad news. Mom and Dad were splitting up. No more Catholic schools. It was going to be public schools for the 3 girls. Well, for Olga, this devastated her. By everything she understood at the time, this meant, oh no, I'm not going to get into the right college. I'm not going to get the right work. I'm not going to get the right training. This was going to set up a line of events, a string of events that was just going to be devastating to her. Her whole life was through as far as she was concerned. So that night, she went to bed in tears, crying, and she turned to the Blessed Mother Mary.
And I wasn't praying. I was having a conversation with her. I was just crying and weeping and just venting, telling her how afraid and you know, I was, and that my education was important to me, and that I didn't want to be stupid, and I wanted to go to college. And, you know, the things an 8th grader would say. I didn't ask for anything. I was just venting. And then suddenly, as if a sedative had kicked in, and I had perfect calm and perfect peace. And I knew, I didn't understand, but I knew that my education would always be taken care of. It wasn't a belief. It wasn't anything that was transmitted to me. I didn't hear anything. It was sort of as if the peace and the knowing were the same thing. And I was so calm so suddenly that I just fell asleep.
A week or two later, Olga's home. It's daytime, weekday. It's after school. Phone rings. Now, Mom and Dad have split up by then. Mom's off at work, and Olga's answering the phone, and it's one of her teachers. This has to be bad news. Teachers don't call home unless it's bad news, and they're looking for, Mom or Dad.
All of my teachers in school were nuns. My English teacher, her name was Sister Audrey, and she said, well, I called to ask you, where do you want to go to high school? And I was like, what? Where do you want to go to high school? She was getting frustrated with me. And so I answered, I said, St. Joseph by the Sea High School. It was an all-girls private Catholic high school, and it was a country club. And it was it was expensive. It was on acres of land. It was magnificent. Only the daughters of the mafia got to go there, And she just hung up the phone. She didn't say, okay, thank you, goodbye, boom. No, she just hung up the phone. Shortly thereafter, my parents received a letter from St. Joseph by the Sea saying that I had not only been admitted, but that I had been granted a full scholarship.
Well, the family's not about to look a gift horse in the mouth. It's not like they're going to raise their hand and go, excuse me, did you guys make a mistake? Heck no. Off goes Olga to Country Club Estates High School.
And it wasn't as if I was the teacher's pet. I mean, she would always say things to me like, Olga, you have a mind like a sieve. And I didn't know what a sieve was because my mom didn't own a colander. She didn't own a sieve. But I knew that it wasn't a compliment from her tone. So it wasn't like I was her favorite child or anything, her favorite student. Oh, and here's the other thing. Mediocre grades. I'm no scholar. I was no scholar. My grades were mediocre. I didn't merit a scholarship. And it happened, on the heels of my crying and weeping and feeling calm and, and the phone call. And to be clear, when I felt at peace, it was that all of my education would be taken care of.
Olga wanted to go to NYU. She doesn't have the grades to get a free ride. So she sits down with her counselor and says, what can I get? What can we do here?
And she said, okay, you're going to get this scholarship and you're going to get this grant and you're going to get this tuition waiver and you're going to get, and I'm like, wait a minute. How much do I have to spend out of pocket? And she said, nothing. And again, I'm like, what? And I said to her, how can that be? Why am I getting all of this money? And she looked at me and she goes, honey, because of your SAT scores. To this day, I don't know what my SAT scores were.
And again, she does really well in testing, this time for the MCATs, and she gets into medical school, pre-med, for her science classes. And sometimes when she's taking classes, she's also teaching, which enables her to take, again, free classes. She goes into the military. Well, that gets her more free education, gets her into law school.
So between teaching fellowships and scholarships and grants and tuition waivers and military benefits, all of those degrees were free to me. I earned a bachelor's degree, 3 masters, and a doctorate, all for free. That was a lot of education.
It's a lot of education for basically nothing.
Right.
Your relationship with Mary has remained strong as well?
Of course, throughout my life. Mary has my back, And it's not even prayer for me. It's conversation. It's like talking to a friend. Yeah, I don't ask for anything. I'm grateful. I'm super grateful for everything I've been blessed with in my life. And so just my conversations are about gratitude.
So in your prayers, you generally don't ask for something?
I never ask.
So when even as an 8th grader and you're going through this, oh no, I'm going through this hardship, Mary, you are more telling her more, I don't want to call it a rant, but you were.
Exactly. I needed to vent. I needed to be comforted. I needed someone to talk to. I knew that if I wept and cried with my parents, it wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to, it would only upset them more. They were upset. They were getting a divorce. It wasn't going to add to the situation, and I trusted Mary. I knew she heard me.
It's a great approach. Most of us can't do that. I remember trying, going, this week, I'm just not going to ask for anything. I found it incredibly difficult not to be asking for things.
I the whole intention thing, I intend, I have a good work ethic. I have a good study ethic, right? I'm driven to succeed and to make something of myself. I always have been. So I've always set goals for myself, right? And I've worked towards those goals, and I've intended to be successful. And so I guess, it's like God helps those who help themselves. Mm-hmm. I guess that's what it comes down to for me.
Right.
So I knew I had to help myself, and I helped myself as much as I possibly could, knowing that in the background that things were happening in my favor, like with Sister Audrey.
Yeah. I guess I've gotten better at the, whatever your will, I know it's the best. I know I may not understand what's going on right now. There's a lot of that in the conversation. Yes. There's a lot of that, that it's in his timing, it's in his plan. If it fits, it fits. Because whatever way it goes, it's the best way, whether I realize it or not.
I believe that, and I've expressed that. Your will be done, whatever it is. You won't give me anything that I can't handle.
Yeah.
I've believed, and so that was that, and I hope this has helped.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This is kind of a teaching moment. It's a couple of great stories.
But they're so similar, a lot of them too, like the steering wheel ones. It's amazing. I mean, something is happening.
Big time.
Yeah. Big time.
It's called saving somebody's life. Right then and there, it would be over.
It would have been so over. Not just for me, but probably a lot of people who would have been so over that day.
And it just wasn't time.
It wasn't my time. So, and I can only, again, when I pray, when I have conversations, I say, I hope I have lived up to your expectations. For whatever reason you saved my life that day, I hope I've come through for you. I hope I've repaid you. I hope I've done whatever I was meant to do. Because, you saved my life. You must have saved it for a reason. And I hope I've come through.
Yeah. That I'm living my purpose. I mean, isn't that's it right there. Just to help me live my purpose. And if I go off track, you're going to redirect me. And he does. Right. These stories are great. This is a great podcast episode. It's very simple, but also very powerful in how you pray and how you've prayed through your life. And I think the real lesson is in your prayer and your connection, your beautiful connection to God. So.
I felt bad for Jesus because I had an Our Father and the Hail Mary, and I'm like, what about the prayer for Jesus, And so, doesn't he get one? I felt bad as a kid, and I made one up. Then I've said the Jesus prayer my whole life.
What's your Jesus prayer?
Dear Jesus, you are the light of my life. You are my dawn and my night, and I am yours. You are my Savior and advocate. I love you, I thank you, I trust you and need you. Please live in my heart. Make me brave and strong and wise in you, that I may do your will, my King. May you be forever adored as you will forever adore your creation.
Beautiful.
That's it.
That's beautiful. Olga, this has been lovely.
Well, thank you. It's been lovely as well.
Best conversation ever with an Olga, without question. Thanks, Olga. Appreciate it. Oh, I just thought of another petite Olga. I did. Anybody old enough to remember the Russian gymnast Olga Korbut? Remember her? Mm-hmm. Show of hands, anyone? Okay, just check. I love the way you pray. And you're right. It takes gratitude. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You have to have gratitude to be in a prayer life that you don't really ask. You have to be so filled with thankfulness. You get up out of bed and thanks for that comfortable bed, God. Oh, the carpeting. Thanks, God, for carpeting. Thanks for indoor plumbing. Thank you so much. Oh, thanks for this banana and the peanut butter that goes so well with it. Is that just me? Anyone? Thanks for, thanks. We have a furnace. Thank you. It's toasty warm in here on a cold day. Thanks for the roof above my head. Thanks for the car that gets me to the job. Thanks for as you go through your day, when you start listing everything and saying thank you for everything, you realize you have so much more than you don't have. Then when you get to that thing that we all have, that thing that we wish was going in a little different direction, that worry we have, it reduces the size of it, because then it just becomes, oh, you got this, right, God? You got this. Jesus, you got this? Thanks. And then back into gratitude again. Gratitude is key. It really is key to not asking, of just trusting. Very good, Olga. Very good. Can we go back to the tarmac for a second? Because something crossed my mind when Olga was talking about the men taking off the plane and just shot right in front of them. How many of those men also were nudged, let's say, by the Holy Spirit? God's hand is in everything, right? So how many more men were nudged into leaving early? Like her father had been nudged to leave early. But how many thought, no, I'll just go with the family, it's easier. Sometime we are nudged solo. You go. You go. I'm finding that more and more in my own life. yes, my wife and I, we do this podcast together. I do this part, the audio part. She's doing the behind the scenes, the website stuff and all that, right? Speaking, we work together on getting speaking engagements and all that. We both have our roles in that. But she is now very heavily involved in other ministries, as I am now involved solo in some of these other ministries. And more and more in my own life, I'm getting and she's getting the nudge of just go. You. It's not a couples thing. It's not a family thing, It's not a married thing. It's you. Go do X. Watch for those nudges too. It's not always the family plan, okay? Watch those nudges. It saved that family. It saved that father, And the dazzle. Again, I love the dazzle of God, the steering wheel. Never let go of the dazzle of God. It's what connects us to the early church. It's why the church grew. The church was built on the miraculous. Don't ever lose the dazzle. Don't ever roll your eyes and just say, yeah, what? No, look at the dazzle of what happened in her car. The dazzle connects us to the early church, to Christ. Now, think about this. Christ is walking around doing stuff, right? Are the people initially saying to each other,
did you hear the point 5 of his Sermon on the Mount? Yes, when he was talking about...
Come on. What's the deal with did you hear about the fish? And the loaves of bread. The kid had these couple of fish or something. He fed 5,000 that day. What are you talking about? He fed 5,000. I'm not kidding. He fed 5,000. That's just the men. They had wives and kids there too. What are you talking about? This kid had a couple of fish. Somebody had some loaves of bread. Anyway, somehow they fed 5. Can you imagine? The dazzle of that, waking people up to then say, what did he say? What did he do? Well, here's what he said. Here's what his teachings were. But it was the dazzle that got the attention. Otherwise, I'm sorry, Jesus is just some guy walking around saying some stuff. The dazzle of God, and it's still going on today. Angels are still grabbing steering wheels to wake us all up. That wasn't just for Olga. That's for me. That's for you. Think about the angel for a second here. Angels going, I get to do something physical today. This is a spiritual being that on this day is allowed to do something physical in this world. This is a collision. Heaven and earth right here. Let's see, angels looking around. Where's that truck? Oh, there's the truck. Here comes the truck. Get ready, Olga. And Olga turns to the left, and the angel is grabbing it with his hands or with his mind, however he does it, and yanking it the other way to the point where she feels the tug. The red mist doesn't happen. All these other oblivious drivers, the trucker and all these other people all around have no idea what Olga knows. As her head is spinning and the angel reading the head, the mind of Olga going, process that. Process it. Go to God. And Olga's going, I got an angel in the car. Yes, you've got an angel in the car. Look at what God is doing in that moment. It was over 40 years ago that dazzle happened, and it's like it was yesterday. That's the beauty of the dazzle. It wakes us up, points us towards Jesus. Then we can get into the doctrine. At least that's the way it was for me. Maybe for you, the doctrine just made sense from the get-go. But for me, I needed to see some dazzle. I needed to see what God is doing now. It's great what he did 2,000 years ago. Jesus is not just a historic figure. He's still with us doing those dazzling things. I love that. I love it. I'm convinced one of the biggest reasons people leave the church, including me for 30 years, because God is boring. Can you imagine we let God get boring? The last place God should be boring is inside the church. Look at the dazzle of no student loans, no cost to her education. As an 8th grader, she got this. As an 8th grader, talking to Mary, going on an emotional rant, and then perceiving the calm, which I believe is offered to all of us, but she felt it. She fell into it. She knew however this was going to work, it was going to work. Instead of going to the worry and the more worry and how's this all, she somehow found that peace. And that peace is offered to all of us. I'm convinced of that. And then just stand back and watch just 3 masters, a Bachelor of Science, and a doctorate. And it didn't cost her a thing. Beautiful. And in terms of looking to the saints, let's say, to intercede, Mary this time instead of going directly to Jesus, and obviously Olga prays to Jesus. She even came up with a prayer for him, which is pretty cool. The analogy has often been made about how it's difficult to look directly at the sun, but it's easy to look at the moon. Why? Because the moon so beautifully reflects the sun. And so we look to Mary in that beautiful reflection of his light, always guiding us to Jesus. And that's what Olga was doing. And the outcome was perfect. Calm, peace, a knowing. Once again, a knowing that goes beyond faith. Thank you, Olga. I appreciate it so much for your story. Now then, what's your story? You got to tell me. You got to go to touchedbyheaven.net and let me know. And my Patreon shout out this week is Robin Hanna. Thank you, Robin, for helping us out through Patreon. You can do the same by going through episode 99 here at touchedbyheaven.net or go straight to patreon.com and just do a search for Trapper Jack. Thank you so much for listening to these episodes, sharing these episodes, rating and reviewing and all those good things as well. And I will see you here next week for episode 100. Whoa. What will that one be about? I haven't a clue. Can't wait to find out. See you then here at Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.